Welcome one and all. This is WESN Content Capital Face of Sports. And today, this Friday, we are going to be talking a matter that has concerned Trinidad and Tobago in particular over the last 2 weeks. It has been a wrongdo for longer than that, if you ask many officials in Trinidad and Tobago. We are talking about the whole question of match fixing and sports betting. Match fixing in particular because one local football coach recently alleged that about 4 or 5 players were involved in match fixing and he had to remove them from his team. This was in the Tier 2 of the Premier League here in Trinidad and Tobago. Joining us to talk about that via Zoom, we have Mr. Emmanuel Macedo de Mieros. He is currently the CEO of SIGA. SIGA is the Sports Integrity Global Alliance. He joined us. He's had a tremendous experience being involved in FIFA matters, being involved with UEFA, being involved in football matters. Over 30 years of experience Emmanuel Macedo de Mieros has and continues to have, and we are so glad that he can join us. He's, of course, originally from Portugal, and he joined us. So let me say welcome, Emmanuel de Mieros. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
And right next to me is Mr. Brian Lewis, the immediate past president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, also general secretary of the Caribbean Canuck Olympic Committee, and also a SIGA executive himself. Brian, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, and
Emmanuel,
sharing the same stage with Emmanuel.
Emmanuel, let me start with you first. Tell us a little bit about how big a deal is match fixing and sports betting. A lot of people believe it's minor, it doesn't matter much, it just happens now and then. Given your worldwide experience, and I want to use that to influence Trinidad and Tobago, how big a deal is match fixing?
Well, match fixing is as old as sport itself. It has always been part of sport, sadly. But no doubt that the commercial appeal and the globalization of sports and the commercialization of sport, of which sports betting is an important part, has amplified the opportunities for those who don't live by the rule of law, don't respect sport, taking advantage of its vulnerabilities. It has also increased the potential for match fixing, sports betting fraud, and a number of other unethical behaviors. It is a global problem, a global phenomenon that crosses borders, crosses countries, crosses sport. And no country, no sport, no territory is immune to the threat posed by match fixing and by what we have been perceiving, the growing influence and infiltration of transnational organized crime. So it is a call for attention. It is an alarm that must be taken seriously, and we cannot live in denial. We cannot just put our hands in the sand and pretend that this is just an exception, this is just a phenomenon that will pass away, because it's not. And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we can put in place a robust set of regulations with up-to-date, efficient legislation involving all countries, involving all relevant sports authorities, and with training, education, and capacity building, with proper monitoring of the sports betting landscape, we can prevent some of these harm consequences.
All right,
it is also a very sophisticated phenomenon, as many sports would tell you.
So let me just cut you for a while. Let me just cut you for a while. I want to ask you this, Emmanuel, based on all that you would have just said, who should be responsible? And I'm asking this question as it relates to Trinidad and Tobago. 2 weeks ago, we would have had a statement from a coach that alleges that there has been match fixing in a football matches prior, meaning over the last 6 to 7 weeks. Now, 2 weeks later, here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have not heard anything from the local football association. We have not heard anything from the referees association. We have not heard anything from anyone. Should that be a concern if we are in Trinidad and Tobago, nobody seems to want to react to it much, except off the record.
Well, let me be clear and absolutely blunt. I think it is a worry. It is a concerning symptom that the government, that the TTFA, other relevant sports authorities are not showing the conscience and the awareness that would be expected. No doubt that this is not gone unnoticed. I presume and want to believe that they are taking action. We are here to support them in the pursuit of the measures that are required to be put in place. But it is important to give a signal to the market, to the football community, to the sports community. And the responsibility to answer your questions is not just on the shoulders of the TTFA. It's not just on the shoulders of the TTOC. It's not just on the shoulders of the government and law enforcement. It is in the shoulders of the whole sports cluster, because we all have a responsibility to play. The fans, of course, should not be indifferent to this. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And I promise you that it will continue, and it will go, and the rabbit hole is deeper than it may seem.
So let me ask you this before I bring in Brian Lewis. From the perspective, based on your knowledge and your dealings with this match fixing and sports betting worldwide, there is a belief in Trinidad and Tobago, sir, that the powers that be and those officials are scared to go deep into this matter because of the repercussions, because of what you have said, criminal activity, violent action. So people are saying, let's be cautious. Let's not say anything because we could be in harm's way. I'm sure you would have encountered that in other countries as well.
Is that question
yes, yeah. So the question is, in situations like that, how we deal with it? Yeah.
I don't have the presumption of guessing what is in the minds of the sports and the political leadership in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't have that presumption nor that arrogance. But again, it is an indeclinable duty and responsibility of both the government to protect the rule of law, to protect the interests and the credibility and the sustainability of the sports sector, against which there cannot be any doubt regarding the sporting truth, regarding the merit on the pitch, on the courts, on the tracks, because that is precisely what undermines the credibility, the trust and the confidence and the future of any sport or any sector. Similarly, what is expected from sports governing bodies is that they assume the responsibility for their own affairs. There is a lot that can be done through the adoption of a proper and robust set of regulations, codes of conduct. And again, as I have done a few years ago, I renew my call for the sports organizations in Trinidad and Tobago and the government to adopt the SIGA universal standards, go through SERVs, and show that they are fit for purpose, show that they can shield themselves, shield the clubs, shield the athletes, and also to live up to the expectations of the younger generations to whom sport is so important. So if there are anyone who thinks that this is impossible, I will tell you right here, right now, it is not. It is doable. There are tools. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. And we are available to cooperate with everyone to put in place these robust sets of regulations. We are available also to provide training, education, and capacity building, as we are doing with so many other countries. But the sooner we start, the better we'll be.
All right.
Because there cannot be 1 second lost in this battle for integrity.
Sure. Let me bring in Brian Lewis. Brian, I want you to follow up what we just heard from Emmanuel. I gave Emmanuel the perspective in Trinidad and Tobago, while everyone seems to have become aware of it because Brian has been speaking about it and people have followed what you would have told me recently on another frequency, and people have asked about it. Why, Brian Lewis, putting you under some pressure as usual, why, Brian Lewis, this deafening silence by many who should be speaking, besides yourself and besides Emmanuel?
Well, and in this case, Travis Mulrain.
Yes, and Travis Mulrain, yes.
I think there are some and Emmanuel will attest to this, that I've spoken out on many occasions within Sport Integrity Global Alliance forums about the importance of recognizing that, as important as these initiatives may be, that deals, in this case, we're dealing with illegal sport betting, match fixing. And just like bribery and corruption, there is a socio-cultural and socio-economic element to it. And as we know, if you look at what has been happening in Trinidad and Tobago, with the explosion gradually of gun violence, as an example, the whole question of drug trafficking, money laundering, human trafficking, criminality, it has grown and become a critical aspect of the society, and fear is a major driving force currently in the society. Sport mimics life. Emmanuel, you have heard me say this on many occasions. You can't separate sport from life. So that in Trinidad and Tobago, what is happening with this particular issue, allegations, is not different from what happens with a number of other allegations in other areas. So for me, I think it is important to deal with the socio-cultural aspect and the reality of the jurisdiction and elements in the jurisdiction. I mean, here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have the Gaming and Betting Act of 2015, which was significantly amended in 2021. There was appointed and established a Gaming Commission. The fact is, and Emmanuel knows this, that the TTFA has within its constitution certain articles. FIFA, UEFA, all of these bodies, the IOC, all of these bodies have codes and regulation that deal or attempt to deal with manipulation of competitions. But to me, there is a broader question that in some aspects, the illegal sport betting and the match fixing is a symptom of something greater. And I see Clarence Rambarat on, former minister and senator. The reality is, and Emmanuel will understand this, and he talks about it a lot. So for example, if you look at the environment in Trinidad and Tobago, sport is essentially amateur and semi-professional, even where you have professionalism. So that the remuneration and the way that athletes and players may be treated may not be how it should be. And it therefore creates the environment for people to be exposed to these significant temptations. And when you look at the fact that the global illegal betting and match fixing is a $1 trillion US industry, and it is, as Emmanuel was saying early on, organized crime cross jurisdiction, multinational, it's not a simple challenge. But
so let me just stay with Emmanuel for a short while, because I know he doesn't have a long time with us. So Emmanuel, you mentioned earlier, before we bring in former Minister, former Senator Clarence Rambarat, you mentioned earlier, Emmanuel, that SIGA is available and willing to help Trinidad and Tobago. Because I know you have to leave very shortly. What do you mean by that? How can they do that?
Well, first of all, we, as a united front of like-minded organizations, spanning from sports organizations, governments, international entities, global business, civil society, I mean, all those who are willing to take action to safeguard and preserve the integrity of sport and what it means in today's society and the global economy, we have come a long way. we have developed the most advanced, robust set of universal standards that provide the state-of-the-art antidote in terms of good governance, financial integrity, sports betting integrity, youth development, and child protection. All this is interlinked as part of an holistic strategy to protect sport and to enhance the way it is governed and operated. So we have the tools, we have the experts, we have the structures that can be mobilized to discuss with the relevant sports authorities and the government to prepare a battle plan that can indeed enhance the safeguard of the sports organizations and the athletes and the coaches and the youth. We also have a number of other tools, such as an independent rating system, which enables sports organizations to really demonstrate that they are fit for purpose. And there is no sponsor, no broadcaster, no government even today that can risk to invest in a sport organization that is not fit for purpose. We are willing to establish dialogue, positive, constructive, effective, result-oriented, so that these matters can be addressed properly and deeply. Because we cannot afford to act like Titanic's orchestra, playing and navel gazing while the ship is sinking. And believe me, sometimes you only note that this is happening when it is already too late. We do not find ourselves with the hole in the sock that we don't know how it started, but we know how it's going to end. So if battles are won before they are fought, this is a good cause, and we are ready to shoulder with all the relevant sports organizations and the government and law enforcement, because believe me, no country is immune, no sport is immune, no sector is immune. And it is because sport has vulnerabilities that organized crime and unscrupulous individuals try to take advantage.
All right, so let me ask you this, Emmanuel, before, of course I want to go to the former minister, because this question is going to somewhat come to him after. From your perspective, how much would SIGA's involvement cost Trinidad and Tobago? Because essentially funding always comes into everything. What sort of costs would we incur to take this sort of recommendations, these sort of fundamentals, and implement them in Trinidad and Tobago? This question is to you, Emmanuel.
What sort of cost?
Yes, what sort of cost?
We are not talking about costs. We are not a commercially driven organization. We were established to provide cooperation. So what guides us is not the profit. It's not the dollar or the yen or any currency. What drives us is a relentless commitment to support and to cooperate with all those who want to have clean sport and want to have sport with dignity, with credibility, so that sport can fulfill its undeclinable social and economic function. That is what guides us.
All right. So that leads me straight to former minister, former senator, attorney at law as well, Clarence Rambrat. Sir Rambrat, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome.
Good afternoon, Andre. Good afternoon to my friend Brian. Good afternoon to all those following the broadcast.
We just heard from both Brian and Emmanuel Macedo de Meros, the CEO of SIGA, about the importance of action being taken given the allegations made more than 2 weeks ago by a football coach in Trinidad and Tobago. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Rambrat, that no action has been taken as far as we know. We have not heard anything. We have not seen anything. Are you surprised by all of this? And as I mentioned just before you came on, there is this feeling, and I mentioned this to both Emmanuel and Brian, that the persons in authority in Trinidad and Tobago are fearful of taking any action because it could have personal repercussions. As someone who was previously involved in the ministry, yes, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, when I long before I left as a minister, I had been saying that I do not want to be regarded as a former anything. I served my time as a minister, and I reverted to being Clarence Clarence Rambarat. 30 years ago, I was admitted to practice as a lawyer. I'm not in active practice, but I'm still a lawyer. And I come from a sporting community on the East Coast in Trinidad. Guaya United happens to be one of my home clubs. Mm-hmm. And I've been involved in sport at all levels, including serving on the local cricket board and being involved in the first set of negotiations on behalf of WIPA with the West Indies Cricket Board. And I've been around sport and I've been around the issue for almost all my life. So I listened to the Pains last week, Saturday, Republic Day, when this issue was being discussed, and I saw the anxiety, Andre,
yes,
in you getting to what's next, what we should do, yeah, and what needs to be done, and I could address that. But I wanna say two things before I do that. I have also a couple of days after I resigned, March 16, 2022, I was on the front page of one of the newspapers, and I was being described as a whistleblower. I know what it is like to hold public office and to have to complain when you see not only poor administration but criminal conduct in front of you. I know what it is like to put my name on letters to the Commissioner of Police and other authorities. I know what it is like to have to go to a police station and identify somebody who met with me in my capacity as a minister, to have to identify that person for a criminal matter involving the person. And I could tell you, being a whistleblower or a complainant is a very lonely place to be in, and also an extremely dangerous place to be in. And I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people who have regrets about what they've done. There's a 13-year-old child who was killed this morning in my home community in Rio Claro. I read the report earlier this morning, and when you see the circumstances of what has been said about matters relating to her a few days before her killing this morning, you would understand how dangerous it is for anybody to be involved in complaining, whistleblowing, and in matters that are related to crime. The key with it, I listened to Travis and I listened to Brian's commentary on Travis, and I will tell you this, the problem with that is the absence of a logical framework which allows us to deal with a matter. So some of the questions I asked myself and I would ask is, first let us start with our players who are in this particular league. What is the nature of their contractual obligations? Are they committed in relation to things like match fixing, betting, gambling? Are they as you have in the international leagues where owners and players are not supposed to be betting full stop in the sport, and betting in particular on matches involving them. So we need to establish that relationship between player, club, and TTFA. TTFA is part of the FIFA framework. What is the extent of the TTFA's commitment to FIFA? Is this a TTFA sanctioned event? Does TTFA have control over clubs playing football but not part of the TTFA or not in a sanctioned sport? Does TTFA have a hold on players or only on players if they play in certain clubs, if they play in certain competitions? And what are the commitments in all of these? So those are things to be examined.
Mr. Rambarat, I just want you to hold on 1 minute, because I know that Mr. Emmanuel has to leave us before 3 o'clock. I just want to finish with him, and then we'll come back to you after 3. Just hold those thoughts. All right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Emmanuel, going forward now, in these 5 minutes that you have with us, before you have to leave, obviously, what immediately would you like to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, sir, about burying their heads in the sand, not doing anything about this matter, and how quickly, 2 questions in one, how quickly can SIGA arrive in this country, whether virtually or otherwise, and try to implement some of your plans?
Well, thanks for the question, and before I leave, let me tell you, it has been a pleasure to participate in your show with people who have given so much to sport, and whose future also depends on their continual engagement, and the courage that they show by making their voice heard, by taking uncomfortable positions. But I think that is the fuel to shape the future. I would like to say the following. The future of sport cannot be dictated by fear. It must be dictated by courageous and bold steps. And it cannot also be dictated by law enforcement. We cannot expect that it is law enforcement that will put order in sport. We have seen that in the FIFA Gate. And if there are lessons that can be learned, is that sport has an autonomy. It should be making use of it, working in collaboration with other stakeholders, with other public and private institutions, because the problems are global. They require global solutions, and they require a concerted, coordinated, action-oriented, reform-driven approach. And I would like to give five suggestions as part of a roadmap to start moving the needle and start moving forward. First of all, there needs to be a robust set of legislation and sports regulations. It is important to ascertain and decide whether we want to have what used to be in the past a monopoly, if we want to have a prohibition of sports betting, or if we want to have a regulated opening of the market. The later is the trend. But to have a regulated opening of the market, we need to understand and we need to decide which types of bets are allowed, what should be the maximum amount allowed to place bets, also as a measure to counter anti-money laundering and criminal infiltration. We need to have a proper system to license sports betting operators, knowing where they come from, where are their credentials, what is their financial sustainability, and who is behind it. It's always very important to know who is the ultimate beneficial owner. And I do not want to see in Trinidad and Tobago what I have witnessed in Brazil. It's a country with 220 million inhabitants, the second largest economy in the Americas, that despite not having a sports betting legislation in place, already has sports betting operators dominating the landscape, making huge investments without proper scrutiny, without proper regulation, and without proper supervision. So we need to build the house from the ground, not from the roof. A lesson to be learned. We also need to entrust sports organizations to do their share, and they can do a lot by establishing codes of conduct, determining, for example, incompatibilities and impediments. For example, players not being able, players and coaches and other key members of the entourage not being able to place bets on matches in which they are involved or competitions that they are part of. But this implies scrutiny. This implies, more importantly, training, education, and capacity building. Where is it? Where is it? It also implies a proper set of measures to protect the IP rights. And why do I mention this? It's because there is not sports betting without the fixture list, without the logos, without statistics, without the data that leagues, clubs, Olympic committees, federations produce. So all these data, all these income streams must be protected so that they can be reinvested back into sport. But I would like to finish by saying the following. I have witnessed in firsthand all the questions that may be populating people's minds in Trinidad and Tobago and many other parts of the world. When I was the CEO of the Portuguese League, we thought, and there were many people who thought, that match fixing and sports betting fraud was something that only occurred in Asia, in Vietnam, in China, where stadiums were full with 300 people. So low it was, the confidence and the trust in the sport. So we cannot live in denial. We cannot pretend that this is a problem that only affects our neighbors because it affects us. It affects everyone. I have seen the navel-gazing attitudes from so many organizations, including the European Union institutions, who I saw back in 2000 in an attempt to raise awareness and spur legislative action that could shield my league, my clubs, my sport community. And you know what? It was like talking against a wall. But we cannot give up, we cannot give in, we cannot lose hope, because as long as we have champions, as long as we have people who really love sport and are prepared to do something about it, we have a chance. And I say this, please believe me, with a positive spirit, with a constructive tone, and with nothing but a commitment to cooperate, to work, not to impose, not to dictate, but to suggest and to propose. After all, we are all here for the same, and that same is called sport. And the media, by the way, Andre, the media has an indeclinable, invaluable role to play. And I want to thank you also for flagging these issues, this concern, because, as I mentioned a while ago, battles are won before they are fought. And this is a battle that is worthy to fight for.
Emmanuel Macedo de Merios, thank you very much for your time. I'll continue to keep in contact with you, and we appreciate, the country appreciates, and the wider world appreciates as well what you've just told us today. And we hope the authorities are listening. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to be here in studio with Brian,
yes,
my brother Brian, and Clarence. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. We take a short break for the news. When we come back, Clarence Rambert will be with us. I'm not going to call him by any other name. Mr. Clarence Rambert will be with us, as well as Brian Lewis. We'll be back.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Gail Pazus appointed Bankers Association President. TTPS falling leads on murder of a 13-year-old. And internationally, torrential rain has brought New York City to a standstill. Now for the details. TTPS Corporate Communications Manager Joanne Archie says that police investigators are following several leads in the murder of a 13-year-old girl and her uncle in Rio Claro this morning. 13-year-old Andrea Lalland and Sylvan Lalland died at their Libertyville, Rio Claro home this morning, while a third man, Ellie Lalland, is being treated for gunshot wounds at the hospital. She pleaded with members of the public who may have information to come forward. Gail Pazus is the new president of the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. In a release sent to the media, the association said Pazus was appointed president on August 10th. She was formally installed as president at BATT's handover and thank you ceremony on September 13th. Pazus is the senior vice president and managing director of Scotiabank. Internationally, torrential rain has brought New York City to a near standstill, with large areas hit by flash floods. A flood watch is in effect until Saturday. More than 3 inches of rain has been recorded in this weather event, and another 3 to 7 inches are expected today. Major roads and subways have been impacted, and a travel advisory has been issued. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Sira Ali. Thanks for watching.
We exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain. And it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes any time KFC time. KFC, it's finger licking good.
The Minister of Finance will present the national budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 on Monday, 2nd October. What will be done to lift our economy? Which sectors will get priority? Will there be an increase in social expenditure? Join host Keaton Shah and political analyst Derek Ramsamouch on AM Prime as we dissect and analyze fiscal year 2022-2023 and examine our financial future. And join WESN for its budget panel debate from 6:30 p.m. on Monday, 2nd October, where we engage in constructive conversations with the people that matter. The #1 morning show, AM Prime, Mondays to Fridays, 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Well, we had a game versus Matura reunited, and apparently information came to the assistant coach about players involved in match fixing. One of the players revealed that he was called earlier on during the day, and he was offered some money to throw the match, and he was asking how possible could that be? And the person who called him told him, you don't worry, we already have some guys on your team that we're going to put things in place with, basically, you know. So I didn't know before the game. It was only after the game the information came to me. And one of the players overheard a couple of the players saying, now is the time to give away a penalty, you know, that kind of thing. So when that information reached to me, I acted immediately. I didn't wait, right? I cut those guys immediately, and we left from being at the bottom of the table till we actually qualified for the playoff. But of course, there's some controversy surrounding our last game against Bethel United.
So can I ask you, this going back to that incident, Travis, when you said you asked the players, you cut the players, did you speak to the players personally to find out if what you would have heard was true, or did you just decide, I'm just getting rid of them?
Yeah, well, I didn't want to take any more chances with these guys. You know, when I look back at some of their performances, we were conceding a lot of unnecessary goals, to say the least. Some of the players who were pinpointed, when I ran their errors through my head, it looked very, very, very suspect. So I, as we say in Trinidad, I take in front before in front seat.
Did the players complain to you, and did you make a formal report to the Trinidad and Tobago Football Association?
Well, we informed the association through the club. I did not personally call. But what I said is that they should be doing some more investigations, because this match fixing has been taking place word on the ground since during the Ascension League. There's been a lot of allegations of players match fixing, and apparently TTFA is just content to just sit back and watch the movie, you know. And this is a very, very serious issue. One of these guys can end up on the national team, and the whole country's hopes and dreams and aspirations could get flushed down the toilet because one player decides to take some money and throw a game. You know, so we need to jump on top of this as soon as yesterday. You know, but it is what it is. People just sit back and, as I say, watching the movie.
Welcome back, people. Welcome back. This is the Face of Sports here on this Friday. We have a Clarence Rambrat with us. We also have with us Brian Lewis. Let me bring in Brian Lewis here first. Brian, you would have heard this before. But Brian, when you hear it again, does anything strike you?
No, well, to me, how we address it in the context of the burdens and the standards of proof and the principles of natural justice and due process is important. And the real question is, what is in place currently to address the issue and the deeper issue and broader issue of illegal sport betting and the match fixing? In other words, if Travis Mulrain made an official, I'm just using those words, report to Guaya United, what did Guaya United do with that information? Did they report to the TTFA? If the TTFA received an official report, what is the process in place at the level of the TTFA to address these allegations? Because as I said the last time, and will say now, investigating allegations is not singularly about establishing guilt. It is also to determine if there was really, in this case, match fixing, and if there wasn't match fixing, then to clear the names of the persons who the allegations have been made against. So that's an important thing. It is also important to protect the legitimate lawful businesses. I mean, there are sport betting shops that take bets here in Trinidad and Tobago on sport. So that would be my thought patterns in terms of where do we go to next. And if there isn't that in place, how can it be strengthened and how can it be addressed?
All right. So let me go back to Mr. Rambat. Mr. Rambat, listening again to Travis Mulrain, and he's from Guaya. There are some people saying, sir, that this may be isolated because he's from Guaya, the location may have allowed it. It doesn't happen in other parts of Trinidad and Tobago. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would say it is very important that we deal with three completely different issues. Going back to Saturday, the entire show on Saturday and the show so far. The first thing I would say is that we have to deal with Travis's what he said and the Guaya scenario. And what I opened by saying is that we have to be clear. Now we don't know. He said that he spoke to the club. I would like to know what is the relationship between the players and the clubs in terms of a contractual relationship, and what are the commitments that the players, the obligations, the commitments, and so on. That is one. And two, what is the link between the club and TTFA? And is TTFA involved because the club is affiliated to TTFA, or are they also involved because this is a sanctioned competition? And then I want to know the relationship between TTFA and FIFA to establish what are the obligations of TTFA and clubs within TTFA and players playing in sanctioned competitions under TTFA. Because what we know for sure exists is that FIFA has a global framework that governs the national organizations and clubs in sanctioned competitions. So I would like to understand I normally call that the terrain. What is before us? We know what Travis has said. What is before us in terms of how do we follow through with a matter like this? And having done that, what are the facts and what needs to be done next? What we have so far is allegations, and I listened to Travis very carefully. But the second point I would say, the second context is that we are a gambling society historically. Trinidad and Tobago's population has come from all over the world, each bringing a different form of gambling history and culture. So we are a gambling society, whether we like it or not. And the idea, I mean, going back to Weiwei and Wapi, and long before we had casinos, we had well-organized gambling, and some cultures are more inclined towards organized gambling as part of what they do as the people. So that I would not. In fact, I readily accept any assertion that there is match fixing and illegal gambling in sport. I am not. I don't see that as a far-fetched possibility. So I would say that in the context of illegal gaming in sport, I think our environment is. I know it well enough to know that the possibilities are very, very real, and I think that what Mulrain has spoken about needs to be examined very closely. And then the third, and that is in the second context of illegal gambling in sport and match fixing. There is no match fixing that is legal. All match fixing is illegal, but there is gambling that is legal and illegal. In the third context, I would like us to think about gambling in sports, sanctioned gambling, and where we're going with that as a country. And that is where the Gaming Commission, and everything, the Gaming Commission, I believe, has a role. But definitely in the third one, in terms of betting, we know that the old legislation and the new legislation that is not fully proclaimed provides for a regime for gambling to be managed, and the commission is the centerpiece. The act has been the only part of the act, the 2021 act, as far as I know, that is in effect is the part that allows us to appoint a gambling and gaming commission, and that has been done. So in the case of Mulrain, I think that the complaint should go to the club and the club to TTFA, and that is one stream. I think that the Gaming Commission should be brought in to determine, for them to pay attention to this and to give an opinion. And of course, whether you go through the Gaming Commission or you go through anybody else, the only body in Trinidad and Tobago that has the power to investigate and recommend to the DPP prosecution is the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And they should be involved. So all levels, I've identified three different theaters of action. One is on the Mulrain complaint. We need to be very clear what the facts are, and most importantly, what are the responsibilities of the TTFA and FIFA in light of Mulrain's complaint. And I think that whatever it is, TTFA must be involved and FIFA must be involved in this. And I believe that there's a high likelihood that there is truth in what is being said. In the second scenario, we need to be very, very mindful of our history, our culture, the way in which we have an illegal version of Playway that is flourishing. We know about it. We've done very little to deal with it. We come from a culture of gaming and gambling. We understand that, and our environment gives rise to the two illegalities of match fixing and illegal gambling, particularly in sport. And the third area is where it is supposed to be completely legal. That is under the new Gaming and Gambling Commission, and we need to examine that to see if what we passed in 2021 as amendments to the old legislation is sufficient to deal with the pervasiveness of gambling in sport now, illegal gambling, and the extent to which that 2021 legislation protects sports owners, the players, the public, or whether we need to be doing further modifications to that. Those are the three things I see as being the areas we should be considering.
Bran, your take on what Mr. Rambat has gone into so much good detail for us.
No, and I think it is important, right? Because what we're dealing with the third point is dealing with what is called the Gambling and Betting Act. Correct?
The Gaming Commission.
No, the gaming, Clarence will correct me, right? The Gaming Commission is a creature of the Gambling and Betting Act. So there was a Gambling and Betting Act 2015, which was amended, Clarence, in 2021. And in fact, the Gaming Commission was appointed in March 2022. And I noted that Clarence, who is much versed in law and legislation, said that it might be that it was half proclaimed. So this leads to my question on the table. The first stream, Club Travis to Choir United to TTFA, involvement of FIFA, what we have seen in the last, since the allegation, is no comment, statement, otherwise acknowledgement from the TTFA. I'm not putting them on the spot, I'm saying. So that's one. And then the Gaming Commission. So my question, now that it's your program, so
go ahead, you can go ahead.
Is that
okay.
Who in the circumstances, who triggers that? Who is the catalyst for that? Because it's well out there now in the public domain.
Well, you know, that question you're asking is the same question I was going to ask both of you all, which is, do you all honestly feel, and I'll start with you first, because you asked a question, but I'm going to ask you back a question, Brian. Do you feel anybody will want to trigger that, or they will believe, as I asked Emmanuel a few moments ago, that we will bury our heads in the sand, and this will blow over like everything else in Trinidad and Tobago? First you, Brian.
So, Clarence made the very important point. I raised it with Emmanuel. I used the word sociocultural, socioeconomic. Clarence went deep in it. That we are a gambling society. Cockfighting, playway, wapi. And then what happened? Horse racing. Years ago, I remember the young fella, there was a ban where 7 jockeys get banned for fixing a race. And it was top jockeys at the time. Venice Richards, Charlie Jones, Francis Asrana, Alfonso Joyet. So, it's not that match. Well, I don't know what to call it.
You want to answer my question?
Yeah, but I'm dancing it because...
Don't dance it. Let's go straight to it. Do you believe that somebody will do exactly what Mr. Ramrat suggested and trigger further action other than what we would have heard from Travis? Travis, meaning Travis Moraine, passing it on to Guaya, Guaya passing it on to the TTFA, and the TTFA passing it on to FIFA. Because we've heard nothing. So do you feel the next trigger will happen, or do you feel, as people have believed, and some of the people who believe so are corrupt persons, obviously, that if you say nothing and you leave this alone because Trinidad and Tobago is the country it is, this will blow over?
Well, obviously, based on what has happened since Travis made the allegation and what the whispers that have been going on for years, one could form the conclusion that it will blow over. 9-day wonder, and then we move on.
Mr. Ramrat, your thoughts on that same question?
But, you know, I would say this. FIFA, TTFA could only act on the basis of something that is brought to their attention. So as it is now, I don't know if anything has been brought to TTFA's attention. I know Mulrain has said he dealt with Choir United. Has Choir United done anything? Is there a nexus between Mulrain and TTFA? Does he have any responsibility to TTFA, or does his responsibility stop with the club? And does the club have a responsibility? Or as a citizen, can Brian, can I, or can you, Andre, ask TTFA, you know, what are you doing in this matter? I think TTFA can only ask, you know, we could only hold them responsible if we've put something before them. Would it be taken seriously and examined? The thing about it, I was saying that some people some people, they do not get involved because of fear. So the fear is in them and they do not get involved because of fear. But I will tell you that some people get very, very fearful later on. And that fear is driven by the lack of interest by the enforcing authorities. So you've made a complaint in good faith, and then you realize that the interest in your complaint is non-existent or diminishes over time. And you almost start to feel that that people don't want you to pursue it, or sometimes it turns against you. You make complaints in good faith, and then you find yourself, in all sorts of problems that attack you personally, your family, your integrity, and all of those things. So those things are playing out in my mind since I first came into contact with this story. That I think that if we pursue it, particularly engaging the Gaming Commission, because going back to the legislation is the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Act 2021, and even though the Parliament's website shows that the act was assented to in July 2021, it doesn't show that it is partially proclaimed. But the Commission could only be appointed under Section 5 of the Act if that section has been proclaimed. The question is, what are the plans of the Minister of Finance to fully proclaim the Act? I know that the Commission would have been the normal way we deal with the implementation of legislation. The body with the authority is first appointed and allowed to develop the plan to fully implement, and then that body, with the Commission in this case, would signal to the government its readiness to carry out its functions, and the government will proclaim the sections of the Act which allow it to carry out its functions. So I think we should be asking for the rollout plan for the Commission. Now, there is no doubt that the Act would provide for the Commission to have some power over matters like this. The question I raised earlier, a lot has developed since 2021 in terms of the involvement of betting companies in sport. It's significantly increased to the point that I believe that half of the English Premier League clubs last year had some form of sponsorship from betting companies. And so the technology has become more and more pervasive to allow for gambling. It's very difficult, Andrea and Brian, as you know, I follow cricket on Cricinfo, and it's impossible to go on the site for any information without having these pop-up ads. New Zealand took a look at it, commissioned a study and got the report last year, when in relation to teenagers who are following sports and these pop-up ads, and whether the law should intervene to protect teenagers, because New Zealand saw that there was an increased level of online gambling involving underage persons. So we know that the money being put into sport by the gambling companies has increased. Their involvement has increased. And what I flagged last year when I spoke at the TTOC's forum on technology, what I flagged, or I don't know, it might have been earlier this year, what I flagged was if once this gambling money is driving sport, it's inevitable that players would be approached or would be more involved in providing inside information. I go back to when I was involved in sport administratively at all levels, including with WIPA. WIPA through the Nanad Ramnarayan did a lot of development work with the players, especially the younger players who were coming into this environment, a changing environment, but being open and exposed to being bombarded by all sorts of forces, and you had to train them up to deal with what they would face. Now, at that time, T20 wasn't as rich and pervasive as it is now. Our players, our young players, as you know, you have in India, for example, you have players who multimillionaires without making an Indian national team. You have players who are getting rich without having played national level cricket. So it means that they are basically on their own, negotiating and navigating their own way into this billion-dollar industry, and they are highly susceptible. And the information that match fixers want and the information that legal gamblers want, sometimes very, very simple information and innocuous information, like information garnered through training, who's injured, who's likely to start, who is unlikely to start, who is this, who is that, simple information. And how are we protecting the players and preparing the players for that? And that is where my concern that I expressed at the TTOC Forum on Technology was the extent to which our players are psychologically prepared for bombardment by gambling and gaming companies. And I had written when I was writing for the news, I had written an article before the pervasiveness of T20 saying that this idea of national and West Indies and England and those teams would disappear very shortly, and the game will switch into, and I called it bat, ball, and box. The player who has a bat, a ball, and a box would be able to navigate their way through the world of cricket without the need for national and territorial or West Indies cricket team. And likewise, how are we protecting and helping our players, because they're going to be lured, they're going to be preyed upon, and we're going to find ourselves in a very, very dangerous position. And if we do not have the contractual arrangements to both protect them and also to take enforcement action and discipline them, we're going to find ourselves in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of money in gambling, money in sport. There's a lot of money that is dirty, a lot of money that is tainted. And our players may find it more lucrative to work with the gaming companies than to actually play the sport. That is my fear. The same way that they found it more lucrative to not be in the national arrangement and not be in the Test cricket and the ICC, the traditional arrangements, and to be in the T20 and to navigate their own way through that. I see it becoming more attractive for players to be the source of information to gamblers, both on the legal and illegal side, and that may extend itself to match fixing.
Let me ask you two questions before, Mr. Rama, before I go back to Brian Lewis. One is, what's up? You mentioned the Premier League, so I want to draw reference to this. Recently, actually within the last 24 to 48 hours, remarks have been made suggesting while players are not allowed to bet, owners are allowed to bet. And therefore, that doesn't make sense. That's one.
Well, he said it's hypocritical.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, I'm giving you my words. I'm saying it doesn't make sense. Now, I know about what other people say. I'm saying it doesn't make sense because the owner is allowed to bet and the player is not allowed to bet. And the owner has much more money than the player in the first place. So therefore, their betting certainly will impact a larger pool of money and a larger outlay. Nevertheless, that is one. And the second one would be related to what you would have just mentioned. Do you feel, based on what you're suggesting, or let me not say suggesting, let me ask you this. Do you feel that we've just been speaking about football and you've brought in cricket, that just as accusations and allegations have been made in football in this country and in the wider world, that there is the possibility that the same allegations made towards football can be made towards cricket in terms of match fixing?
Yeah, I would say that in the matter in relation to the UK scenario with the owner, I mean, that is the law, as wherever in the world it is, the law deals with being directly and indirectly involved in betting. Now, this particular owner could say that what the owner has the ability to do is to be part of and something that looks like an investment product. So they gamble through an investment product. And there is some, in terms of legal personality, it is not the owner, it's another corporate entity placing the bets. In this case, of course, the bets are in the owner's name, so that is direct. But I would say whether it's direct or indirect, I think the owner has accountability there. And also keep in mind that the level of protection for an owner is not going to be as significant as the level of protection required for a player, because an owner is much more mature, much more experienced, has much more resources, and so on. Of course, when you talk about human beings, whether you're rich or you're poor or you're hungry or well-fed, addiction is something that would get you and the urge. But I think that a player is less protected and more vulnerable than an owner, and we should be giving players as much protection. And I don't see that this particular owner could escape sanction.
Agreed.
And it is more beyond hypocrisy. In fact, I have made the comment that I am deeply concerned that on the one hand, we could have gambling companies sponsoring the sport, and on the other hand, we are surprised that the players get involved in betting. It's the same hypocrisy when we move from way to play way. I grew up in a way community, and I saw young people whose lives were destroyed because they were found with a mark on their hand, and they got a police charge. And then one morning the state got up and realized that this thing has enough money in it and turned it into something that is legal. I think that it is hypocritical for us to think that we could bring gambling into sport as a sponsor, put the name of the gambling institution on the chest of the players, have the players identify, endorse and promote gambling, and be surprised that the players themselves get involved in gambling. I think it's very hypocritical, and we are not protecting the interests of the players. And you could repeat your second.
The second question was to do with: do you believe what we would have recently heard in terms of football exists in this country in terms of match fixing in cricket?
Andre, if you live in a society where you could put two foul to fight and you bet on it, I don't see why you can't be betting on cricket and football and basketball. I mean, the cricket lends itself in cricket games like cricket and basketball, baseball, for example, gives you far more opportunities to create odds that are capable of attracting wagers. I think that the same way in India, they woke up one day and in India, gambling is not unlike our society, and most societies in India, gambling is not allowed in sport. And we woke up one morning and had a revelation that and it was never proven. I would say the name and say it was never proven, but we woke up one morning and heard the allegation that Mohammed Azharuddin, who scored a test century in his games, was involved in match fixing, and later on, it was never proven. We heard the name Kapil Dev being associated with. So it took a while before the truth came out. Hansi Cronje, for example, when it was revealed, it was also a shock, and it took a while before the world got accustomed to it. So I think that down the road, it will come out the extent to which there is not just illegal gambling in cricket, but there is match fixing at different levels in cricket, because it lends itself. You see, once you move away from the outcome, betting on the outcome, if you were betting on the outcome, it becomes something that you have to have a lot of people involved in it. You're a horse racing man, and you to fix an outcome in horse racing, a lot of people have to be part of. But if you're betting or if you're doing side bets, and if you go back to the UK scenario, pay close attention to the fact that the owner is involved, is the allegation extends to side bets. So when I see side bets, then I pay a different level of attention, because side bets, that is where the money is, because the odds on the side bets are extremely, extremely attractive, because the likelihood of a team that has performed very, very well in a competition, and in the final being 49 for 5, the likelihood of that is going to be very, very small. And if it's very small, then the odds are going to be great.
47 for 5. All right, 47 for 5.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, nevertheless, so as we go, Brian, from your perspective, what final message from you, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Ramrat, what final message, what should happen now? I know we have spoken a lot, but let's repeat it, what should happen now, in terms of the allegations made by Travis Mulrain in particular?
Okay, so again, that has a process, and as Clarence said, Travis, the club, to Guaya United, to TTFA, Gaming Commission. I tend to focus always on controllables and uncontrollables. To me, the issue of illegal sport betting and match fixing and side fixing possesses a threat to youth and young people who could have an opportunity via the unpredictability of sport to establish a career that is legal and lawful. That is under threat. To me, what needs to happen now is there needs to be an awareness, just like you have in terms of the anti-doping environment, and I'm familiar with that. You have education being an important thing in terms of education and awareness to the athletes and players in terms of the realities of illegal sport betting and match fixing. That to me is a priority step. What TTFA, Guaya, etc. do at this point, and the Gaming Commission and what Sport Integrity Global Alliance is calling for, those are aspects that are uncontrollables because it depends on other people to take the decision. I would say that at an immediate next step, education and some awareness activity, and that is something we could put together. Also, the media, as Emmanuel was saying, in terms of if they want to continue to raise the profile of this particular issue, not as a one-off, but as something that could be systemic, is important.
Sir Amrat, to conclude, final message from you to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, all those listening on this matter and going forward.
Yeah, I want to say that when I spoke at the TTOC's technology conference, I highlighted I am very concerned about young people in sport, and simply because I know the vulnerability. Things in our society, we think that something needs to be wrong with you for you to be in any form of addiction. We think that it must be something wrong with you, but I don't think so. We are all vulnerable. It's very easy to cross that line. Has it impacted secondary school soccer? Has it impacted secondary schools cricket? I am very concerned, not especially since we have the companies involved in the sponsorship, and we have it globally, and I am very, very concerned about it. I'm also concerned about Mulrain's complaint, and and what is going to happen. I think that TTFA, and I know that TTFA has a responsibility, not just to the country, but to the international fraternity. And I think that the commission has a responsibility, and it's important that they be engaged in it. I look, that particular legislation is one that I was involved with as chairman of the legislative committee of the cabinet in developing. I also was involved as leader of government business in the Senate in making sure that it made it through. I was happy. I spoke on it. I told a story. I don't know if I could tell you very, very quickly. I told a story when I was in Trinidad, was in the country and was campaigning in the 2015 election. I went into a place to get something to drink, and one of the guys there encouraged me to play away. Mm-hmm. And I played and I stuck the receipt into my pocket and I went my way, and that was that. I played 3 marks at his at his. I got a Zeppo from him, and I played marks. And then a couple of days after, I normally go through my pockets and check out my receipts and so on and put my business together. And I almost died when I saw a piece of paper written panty, bra, and jockey shorts, and I said to myself, what the hell happened to me at what? And I was thinking I must have lost my mind at some point. What if my wife see this? What panty and bra and I bought? And I was just thinking and asking, my brother. He says, no, Clarence, that's when you play the 3 marks. And I say, yeah, but this says, and then I realized that this was a parallel playway. And you go into a place and you play as though you play in the playway, and I was shocked. And I mean that added to what has always been in my.
Did you win?
Part of me, which is to deal with the pervasiveness of gambling. I support casinos. I support playway. I support games of chance. I support gambling and betting. I do in fact support it. I think it's an important part of economic and social activity.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Tarama. Did you win? Did the panty, bra, or jockey shorts win?
I never look back to see as a matter. I have a few lotto tickets around me that I never. But I grew up in playway. That is how I know the culture. I grew up in Wayway, and I grew up around Wapi and Sipsam and all the other things. And I have no problem with it. It is a rich part of our culture. I was happy that we brought in through the legislation it's a 96-page bill that we passed. I think that at that time it represented some of the best work we could have done, but a lot has happened in the last 2 years, and I think we should have another look at it. But before we do that, we should move and engage the Commission on the full proclamation, and maybe Andre, you could invite the Commission representatives to be on your.
Definitely, I'll definitely consider that. Certainly.
Well, keeps talking about framework and building it. I think our history, some of the old legislation just couldn't work. This new legislation, it's been passed. It went through a lot of expert hands and so on. And I think it's a starting point, but always remember that in our society, in our legal framework, enforcement, particular criminal enforcement, rests with the police service, and we've kept that model, and the Commission itself would be able to take administrative action as the law provides, but anything further than that, when you talk in the context of match fixing and illegal gambling and criminal sanction, then you have to have the TTAPS involved.
So thank you very much. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Clarence Rambrad. Thank you, Brian Lewis, and of course, earlier we had Emmanuel Demerius. A lot has been revealed today. We know more will be revealed, hopefully, and more action will be taken that can benefit Trinidad and Tobago. Again, thank you both. Take a short break, and we'll be back. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
The Minister of Finance will present the national budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 on Monday, 2nd October. What will be done to lift our economy? Which sectors will get priority? Will there be an increase in social expenditure? Join host Keaton Shah and political analyst